Hi, Rich Tyson here. Hey, in 1960, I was 10 years old. My father, U.S. Air Force Captain Herbert G. Tyson, was stationed in Japan at Tachikawa Air Base. When our family arrived there, we lived in a small village called Kunitachi, some distance from the base. I was a fourth grader and was immediately enrolled in the American grade school located on the base. Living off base and going to school on base provided a logistical challenge in getting me home from school. A bus was available to and from the railroad station in the town of Tachikawa, but such transportation did not exist between Kunitachi and the air base. Most days, my dad could drop me off in the morning at school, but my school days always ended before he could leave his work, so I had to find my own way home. My parents came up with a solution. I would take the bus from school to Tachikawa Station, catch the train to Kunitachi Station, and walk home from there. At first, my folks were a bit nervous about the idea. They rode on the train with me several times to be sure I understood the process. It wasn't long, however, before they were confident that I could successfully undertake this daily adventure on my own. The train ride was pretty simple. There was only one stop between Tachikawa and Kunitachi. However, the train was slow. Usually the trip took about 45 minutes. My mother suggested that I pass the time reading. Then and now, I love to read, and so I was quick to agree. For several weeks, the system worked flawlessly. My parents quit worrying, and so did I. And that's where things got dicey. One winter afternoon, I was deeply absorbed in reading. When I finally looked up from the pages of my book, I realized that the train had just stopped at a station that I didn't recognize. It only took me a few seconds to realize that I had missed my stop at Kunitachi. I didn't know what to do, so I froze. Several more station stops were made before I recognized the name of an upcoming station, Tokyo. I then realized that the train was heading into the Tokyo Metroplex. The farther we went toward what was then the most populous city in the world, more and more people crowded on the train. I spoke virtually no Japanese, and I was clueless as to what to do. Scared to death, I did what most little boys would do, I guess. I buried my head in my hands, and I started to cry. It was in these moments of despair that I felt a hand touch my shoulder. I looked up into the eyes of a young Japanese man. In somewhat halting English, he asked if he could help me. I sobbed out my plight. He then smiled and said, "I will get you home." At the next station, my rescuer ushered me off the train and led me to the opposite platform, where we soon caught a train going back toward Kunitachi. When we arrived there, he asked if I could find my way from the station to my home. I assured him that I knew the way, and at this point we parted. I don't know this young man's name, but I do remember his gentle smile and willing sacrifice of his time for me. He said that he was grateful that I had provided him with the opportunity to practice his English. Of course, I felt that he had saved my life, and my parents were deeply grateful for what he had done. As you might imagine, I received quite a tongue lashing from my parents for my inattentiveness, but its impact was minimal compared to the incredible fear I had experienced. Today, nearly 60 years later, I still remember my visceral sense of hopelessness and terror. My experience as a frightened little boy was a pivotal moment in my life. Today, having an adult perspective on the incident, I realized that my rescuer was probably around 25 years old. That means that he was probably a scared 10-year-old himself when American bombs were falling on his country late in World War II. It would have been so easy, not even 15 years later, for him to ignore a distraught little American boy and not reach out to help. Instead, he showed compassion for me, making me want to do likewise for others. The great lesson here is so simple. We are all part of the same human family, yet for some reason, this seems to often elude us. We define ourselves as Americans or Japanese or any of the world's 195 sovereign nations. We see one another as black, white, brown, or yellow, We are liberals or conservatives, Republicans or Democrats. We see the world through what makes us different rather than what unites us. We calcify ourselves into our conflicting positions rather than our common interest. And these positions inevitably cause us to contend with one another and to become blind to our opportunities to help, even to rescue each other. In this extraordinary season of disease, civil unrest, and natural disasters, perhaps we have a special opportunity to see one another differently, to recognize our common humanity, and to lift and sustain one another. As a coach for many years to CEOs and business leaders, I have stressed the importance of sustaining those who work for us. This necessarily entails seeing them not as just cogs in our corporate machines, but as human beings with their own struggles, challenges, and opportunities. This requires a new type of judgment, one that is more facilitative than demanding. There will be those who dismiss this counsel as foolish naivete, but I have seen it bear fruit, not only in business, but in families and communities. I believe that this simple desire to lift and sustain one another can be truly transformative, especially in these challenging times. We can reach out to one another with an encouraging and helping hand. We may have to do this wearing a mask with 6 feet between us, or perhaps even electronically. But like my Japanese rescuer, we can get one another safely home. Thank you.